Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the Soapbox. Go on, hop up on your soapbox. Ba-da-da-da. Anyway, good to see you. Hope you're feeling good today. Today, I was thinking I'd just like to talk a little bit about making music. So, we there's a lot to talk about, and I could just obviously go on, and there will likely be more episodes about this. But I got to thinking, we need to touch on this subject a little bit. So, music, in terms of, I'm reading a number of good books right now, but one of them is David Byrne's How Music Works. And it's fascinating. It's a little intellectual, but it's fascinating. It's a really, really good read. David Byrne is the lead singer of Talking Heads. He also has an excellent solo career. But just check him out. And he wrote this wonderful book called How Music Works, and it is just really, really interesting. So anyway, he's talking a lot about the production of music and how to make music and his process with making music. And as I've been thinking about it, I'm like, oh, right. He points out that for the majority of music's life, as it were, as far as what we know as music, it was not recorded. So once recording technology came around in the 1870s, 1880s, something like this, ever since then, it's started to kind of change the game with music. For the longest time, when we practiced music or when music was consumed, as it were, it was live. It was live. It had to be made while it was happening. And that's what we thought of as music. It was a rare and precious thing that we only got to experience at some points in our life. Now, if you think about where we have music now, God, you got music in your car, you got music in your headphones, you go see live bands, you watch music online or watch musicians play online, you listen to music all the time. We put music on records, we put it on in the background. You go to a restaurant, they turn on TVs, they turn the sound off the TVs, they turn on music, and then we talk over the music. So I think we might be, I don't know, it's sort of like two things at once, right? We're both loving music more than ever, but we're also taking music for granted more than ever. So I just want to encourage anyone out there who thinks they like music enough to play music, to make music, to produce music. Now, don't get caught up in the chase of just running after a music career for the sake of having a music career. That's not really the point of it. When you start playing, and it doesn't really matter how you play, but when you start to play, you start to see that there's this landscape out there. It's sort of like a surfer first beholding the Pacific. And you go out and you want to explore this landscape. You don't want to know all of it, but you do want to know how to harness the power of it. So, if it doesn't really matter what you're into, what style you're into. If you're into more classical, that sort of thing. Or if, like me, you're more into the rock stuff, See, the days are not the best of times, but they're the only times I've ever known. I believe there is a time for meditation in cathedrals of our own. However it is you want to, or if you want to sit down and noodle, if you want to play Heart and Soul. Right? It can be simple, it can be complex. Whatever it is you're into, I encourage you always to try it. Try making it. If you start working on practicing music and making music, you might find it's not as easy as it seems. Or perhaps parts of it are easier than you ever thought they would be. Maybe you have a musical knack. But if you start studying music and really taking it in, then maybe, just maybe, we won't start taking it for granted as much out in the world. I know that musicians, songwriters, I feel this way. I'll notice that when I'm at a restaurant or at a bar, the music will just be blaring, and whether it's good music or not good music, it's just all in our face all the time, and you have to spend all this time actively ignoring it. And that's not how we should treat music. This stuff takes time. It takes craft. It takes years and years and years of patience. And those are the things you'll learn if you practice music. You practice diligence, patience, wonder, and awe as you learn. Oh my gosh, you've got all these notes here, but it's your job to then figure out how to make something that makes a little bit of sense out of the chaos. So once you pick up just some simple things like a C chord, an F chord, a G chord, if you learn 3 chords, you can make music. Now, it obviously gets more complex than that because it's kind of like a language. Music is very much like a language of feeling, a language of emotion, not necessarily a language of symbols. Now, we've created a whole vocabulary of symbols about how to read, but I'll tell you something. Let me tell you something right now. You don't need to learn how to read music. You don't. You can if you want, but you don't have to because it's not required. It's sort of like English. You can learn English, but you don't need to necessarily read it. Now, I'm not advocating anybody out there learn English and not learn how to read. It really helps if you know how to stop at the stop sign. But in terms of music, shit. One of my favorite pianists of all time is Earl Garner. Now, Earl Garner was an absolute madman. I encourage you to listen to his music, watch the documentary on him. That is fantastic, just absolutely beautiful. He could just do anything on the piano. Any song he heard, he could play. And he never learned how to read music, or at least that's the urban legend. And I think that is really cool. Paul McCartney, if you watch Get Back, come on, y'all, watch Get Back. Get Back is good. Streaming now on HBO Max. Or is it Disney? I think it's Disney. Ooh. So, but Paul even says, he's like, I don't really know much about music theory, and I just sort of play the white keys, and then here I'll add the black key, and that's beautiful. Legend goes, when Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, was asked one of the biggest mistakes he made in music, he said something like learning theory. So it's not always necessary that you learn the symbols of music, because if you know how to do something beautiful, learn how to do that and you never learn how to read, good for you. That's just fine, as long as you're making music. I encourage everyone out there to put their hand at least one instrument, right? So anyway, let's move over to the guitar now. There's so many ways you can practice music out there. And a really good way to practice music is to play other people's songs, right? If you play other people's songs, if you learn some basic chords, learn other people's songs, learn their rhythms, learn their style, learn the words and the way they craft their melodies, then it can invoke in you the power of what it means to be a musician. Cause remember when we were driving in your car, speeds fast, felt like I was drunk. City lights lay out before us, and your arm felt nice right around my shoulder. And I got a feeling that I belong. And I got a feeling I aim to be someone, be someone, be someone. So you practice other people's music, and it will make you a better musician. Also, it's just kind of cool, right? You know how good it feels to be able to play that song? It feels great. Tracy Chapman's awesome, too. If you never heard Tracy Chapman stuff, we should do a whole show on Tracy Chapman. Tracy Chapman kicks ass. So go and listen to some of Tracy's music. But anyway, it's just, and even if you want to approach it more technically, right? Sometimes all I'll do when I sit down is not necessarily play songs or play in some kind of performance, but I'll just make patterns up. And just do this over and over and over until I become more dexterous. Or do exercises that take you across the strings, right? Of course, there's strumming patterns. You could just sit with your guitar. You don't have to play notes. You could just go. Just practice your rhythms. Rhythmic vocabulary is real. And we all know when you meet somebody that doesn't have any rhythm, you can kind of tell. You know what I'm saying? You know when you meet somebody and you're like, something a little off about this guy. And then you're like, he can't. And that's not bad. It's not bad, but it's just something we got to practice, right? So I see these days, perhaps what we're doing is we're consuming a lot more music, but we're not making it necessarily on a local or a family level. And that's kind of what I think we should encourage people to do. Don't necessarily play music or practice music because you're going to go be some rock star. You can be a rock star if you want. More money, more problems. But I actually just get such great enjoyment of being able to just kind of So, it takes time. I often tell my students, okay, look, if you go see the David in Florence, Italy, Il Davide by Michelangelo, you'll see this beautiful chunk of marble that has been polished and perfected. But ultimately, that started as just one big slab taken out of a mountain. So Michelangelo spent days and hours and weeks and months working on this thing, and then we just, boom, see it right there, done. It's not what they call palimpsest. Palimpsest. Word of the day. That means you can see the work that went into it to make it up. It would be like if you saw a short story written with all of the notes in the margins and all of the words scratched out and all of the replacement sentences and all of the paragraph indentions written in. That would be palimpsest. We generally don't see art that way, particularly music. Somebody could spend years on a song and then you hear this final squeaky clean product and you have no idea the amount of practice and struggle and effort that went into wrangling that song into creation. And generally, if you're going to create something, you have to wrestle it into creation. It's not always easy. But if you go and see the David, you'll see this big chunk of marble. But to Michelangelo, he threw away more marble than he kept. So it begs the question, which is the more important? The marble that's kept and marveled at, or the marble that was cut away and thrown out? Well, to the consumer, the product. To the artist, the rubbish. You got to go through every little inch and speck of dust and rubbish and things that you have to throw out in order to find that one image that you keep. And that takes time. So when you go into it, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. If you have to... No, that's not it. No, that's not it either. There it is. Now, that's just a piece I've been working on for weeks. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's going. I'm not necessarily going to record it or turn it into a song. I just like playing it. So go and watch Get Back. If you watch Get Back, you're going to see some musicians where the songwriting muscle, the practice muscle, the compromise muscle, the ability for them to shift feel, shift rhythm is very, very strong. So over time, that's what's going to happen on the keys. You might start doing something a little bit what you might think of as boring. But eventually you start to see how that technique allows you to do some other interesting stuff. And the musical mystery is always available. So I encourage anyone out there not to just be a passive consumer of music. Make it. At the very least, study it. Think about it. At the very least, explore it. So get out there, play music. And I got a couple of resources here for you if you want to hear them. So just get you a book like this for your acoustic guitar. You can look up literally millions of tabs online. I have the Ultimate Guitar tab feature on my phone. This book is awesome. Quadrivium? Yeah. Quadrivium. It's and the section on music. There's a whole section on music in here where it talks about the frequency, the nature of the frequencies of sound, and about sort of the structure of different musical shapes, how music has an effect on things like harmonics or on nature or certain chord patterns and progressions and how those can be represented in ways that are not, your standard notation. It's a really cool book. It's not all about music, but music is one of the subjects in this book. Look up David Burns' How Music Works. There are so many books on music. Ben Folds has a really great autobiography, A Dream About Lightning Bugs, I think it's called. You know, if you get a book like this, now this book is a little more advanced for those of you that already know your basic chords and scales and some theory ideas, but this is just jazz standards, rearrangements of jazz standards. Then take those standards and make your own arrangements of them. It can get really exciting as the gates begin to open up and open up and open up to you. Live your life by opening up doors and crossing those thresholds. You can do that with music. And it's not always easy. It can be pretty challenging. And I'll tell you this, 2 to 1, my adult students fall away quicker than my children's students because they go, oh, I want to learn to play piano. They have an idea of what they're going to sound like when they play the piano. And the moment they mess something up and it begins to get challenging, they're like, ugh, and they just give up and they walk away. So keep coming back to it again and again and again. If you can learn how to humble yourself before music, music will continuously drop gifts in your lap. Test me on it. Truly. Prove me wrong. And hey, guess what? If you don't like it, tough.
Damn!